Welcome to Week in Horror.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
The only podcast that will feed your horror need.
The need to feed.
With JL.
Yeah, I'm a fucking masochist. I'll watch that shit.
Eugene.
Somebody has to be the sex symbol, I'm sorry.
Alex.
Shit, I just demonetize this forever.
And Johnny O.
How do you like that shit? Got halfway through the monologue before unmuting myself. Golly, it's one of them fucking days.
With industry guests.
Hi, this is Richard Oakes, Director of Host.
Hey, this is Adam Leader, Director of Host.
This is Matthew Mark Hunter.
I'm Don Ellie.
And you're listening to Week in Horror.
And you're listening to Week in Horror.
And this is Week in Horror.
And you're listening to Week in Horror.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
News, trivia, and more.
One by one, we will take you.
Join our live show Wednesdays at 7 Central, youtube.com/weekinhorror, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Week in Horror. Stay scared.
Charlie Welch says, "Yay, whores!" All right, welcome, horror fans. It's Wednesday, not quite 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m. Central Time. That means it's time for another episode of the Week in Horror podcast, the only podcast where terror has no shape. And if you're listening to us, golly, that was bad. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast host, you can join us here for our live show on YouTube so you too can laugh and scream with us. Flex your horror knowledge in the live chat and maybe even win some trivia prizes. Those are coveted trivia prizes, by the way. T-shirts and more T-shirts. This week, we're covering some films released in horror history, February 27th through March 5th. No, we're not. It's all one big giant mess of shit tonight.
It is kind of one message shit. It is
1988 to win the hell ever.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Johnny O, and with me tonight are JL and AA Ron.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. I can't do a salutation for nothing. That's what happens when you're an introvert.
A couple of things we'll work on. The delivery of the little intro line right there, for Johnny, and just kind of like announcing oneself, saying hello to everybody.
That delivery was great.
You mean jump on there and just hello, psychos?
There you go.
That's perfect.
Oh man.
Oh, buddy. So, yes. This episode, I've been both dreading and looking forward to doing this episode because, as you see in the thumbnail, we are addressing, very similar to our American Horror Story episode, where we pretty much looked at American Horror Story, all of the seasons of it, and addressed the thing all the way from Murder House all the way to 1984, and talked at length about all of it. And we're doing the same thing now, only this time we're doing it probably the longest running interconnected piece of horror sexploitative trash called the Witchcraft series. So we're going to be diving deep into that one.
Funnily enough, it didn't start out as sexploitation.
It didn't. It really didn't. And we're going to jump into that. But first and foremost, it just released, and we talked about the trailer last week. And I want to know if you guys saw and what you think of the Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre that just released.
I did not get the opportunity to watch it because I was watching 100 other films for this episode.
I squeezed it in like 4 hours ago, so it wasn't bad. I mean, it could have stood some improvements, but I don't think anything's ever going to measure up to the original.
Right. So one thing that was interesting about this one, because Johnny apparently didn't get a chance to see it. So they're essentially doing exactly what David Gordon Green is doing and Blumhouse is doing with the Halloween franchise. That this movie that just came out is a direct sequel to the 1974 original. And you obviously, I know you will have your issue with Leatherface being so old in that respect. But I
going to be 100 years old almost. I mean, come on. He's like 30 something in 1976, and we are friggin'.
They never actually stayed his age in the original one. They never stayed.
Well, we know he's not 12.
Well, we know he's not 12, but he could be in his early 20s or maybe even late teens. He's just like this ginormous, monstrous dude. I knew some 16, 17-year-olds that were like 6'3", 250 when I was playing football.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Let's extrapolate. Let's go down that road. You wanted to bring. Let's go down that road.
Okay.
Let's, for the sake of argument, say he's 18 years old.
18.
And what year did this first one come out again?
1974.
What year is it now?
2022.
How many years have passed since?
50 years.
So how old would that make him?
Wait, 50 or 48?
48, but
48 years.
Close enough. So how old would that make him? Too goddamn old to be doing the shit that he's doing in that trailer, let alone what else he's doing in that fucking movie, okay?
It would be 64. He'd be, let's see, if he was 18, then he'd be 68, 66 years old. If he was 18 in the first film.
But cannibalism could have effects, grow fast, live long.
Effects. No, usually like live short.
Absorb the power of absorb the life force of your victim.
Just don't eat the brain. Don't eat the brain. I don't care how good it looks. But
Cindy Sue. So if he's 100, Leatherface totally fits.
That's a good point, especially being out in West Texas. So
I will say this. There were positive aspects to the movie and there were negative aspects to the movie. I will say sticking a character like Leatherface in a situation and like kind of like the 2022 culture was funny, and that plays well. That was just quite funny. The whole like people not running because they think that awareness of the consequences of your actions and it being blasted everywhere is a deterrent against a total freaking psycho. So I liked that it threw it in people's faces that the attitudes of today will not allow you to will not be conducive to surviving a horror film. That like attitudes today just aren't compatible. And these
why don't we just get in the running car?
and I did like that they wasted no time in basically it's a slasher film. So they wasted no time in getting into the gore in the slasher. It's like one triggering event.
That's good to hear because I hate slow burn slasher films. It's the fucking like antithesis of what a slasher film's supposed to be.
Right. It was like less than 20 minutes and already, a dude's getting stabbed to death with the bone sticking out of his arm because Leatherface breaks his arm and stabs him to death with the bone sticking out of his arm. And that's where it starts.
Spoiler alert.
I'm sure most everybody has seen it.
That scene was beautiful. I could describe it to you 100 times. When you see it, you will still be amazed. I'm like, that's creative. But yeah, no, they got to the inciting incident in no time at all, which I was worried about because I foresaw them trying to do this whole deep backstory into where he'd been and what he'd done in the meantime. And no, they cut right to it. They pulled out the only safety pin he had and turned him loose, which that's, it's a good thing. It lets him rack up the kill count. And that's what they're
big time. I will say that this one has more kills than any previous Texas Chainsaw film, any of them, because all of them, it's all about a small group that encounters Leatherface, then they all try to survive. Yeah. This one, it's a massive group that is encountering him, and there were a lot of people that, so the film has been deeply polarizing. A lot of people are up in arms saying like, this is not what Leatherface is. This is not what the point of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, that it's just a cash grab and that, these people are too stupid to live and like this. But I can see it from both sides. And I will agree. There are some negative points and some really, really stupid decisions, but there's also some really, really cool stuff in there as well. So I think it's, I was about 70-30 on it. I was, but it didn't disappoint. It is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film.
70-30 is not a middle-of-the-road split. That's a pretty hardcore split.
Well, 50-50 would be...
That would be a middle-of-the-road. 60-40, we're starting to... But 70-30, that's a clear winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's a damn good movie for a horror sequel, especially when everybody in the world wants to reboot now and they just went off of where it was at. I mean, I would see it. Like, I would recommend it to anybody that's watching or listening to go see the movie. It's not a waste of time at all.
Yeah. And I don't want to spoil because there is kind of there's a twist, and of course they set it up for a potential sequel. Obviously, so
That's
state
part
of the
the
end,
grab, of course.
state of the end credits if you want to check that out. But I did like the twist. I did like how they factored it back into the first film, because they actually, in this movie, they actually address a question that never got addressed in any of the other Texas Chainsaw films. There was this one burning question at the end of the first movie, and they finally addressed it in this one, which I thought was really, really cool. So they made good choices. They made some bad choices, but then again, it is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, and you get what you expect. I mean, this is what you expect. You expect to get it, and we got it, which I thought was sweet.
You know, I
scene
always find that really funny, because if you look at the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's not that gory.
Right, it's not. This one is.
It's bloody, but it's not. There's not a lot of guts.
Exactly. You know, it's more. It's what would you say? Like a subtle slasher. You know what I mean? Where you see the hammer hit the guy, and then it's done. And then you'll see the blood dripping off of the what's her name as she's hanging there. You kind of see it, but you don't really see it, which I think is more effective anyway. But everybody has this idea: oh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is so gory, so bloody. Like, no, it's not.
No,
I
more
think it's
psychologically
that
scary.
dirty element. Right. Like the environment itself is a worse enemy than Leatherface is himself to a degree, because it's just dirty and filthy and scary, and that too is a way, because I mean, we've gone through that whole conversation, and they could have used a rougher film stock on this. They shot on digital, but they did a good job of making a dirty setting for it. But I mean, that's a clear way of indicating that you are not in friendly territory, and they go with that. They went with it completely, which is a decision I laud.
I thought it was solid. I thought it was really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the bus scene was great. Was well done. Somebody asked in there, like, where did they get the gas? Was the question, where did they get the gas for the chainsaw? No, that was not the question. And assuming that, given the circumstances,
that was a gas station. Come on, that's easy.
So, I strongly recommend it if you're a fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think this one was solid. And one thing I really liked is that, unlike the Halloween, the new Halloween films, which are like their angle, which I was hoping they would kind of like keep it rooted in reality, where Michael Myers is not some like supernatural wrecking ball, just like oh, he's unkillable and shit. But that was not. This film was not like that. This film was, I think. Well, not yet, but this film was very much like an average I wouldn't say an average dude. That guy Richter was a pretty solid. I want to say, just for sake of the character, a pretty solid Texan. We'll say this. He was a
corn-fed cow tossing motherfucker.
He was a corn-fed cow tossing motherfucker who liked his guns as much as he liked his Texas. His kind of. I'm Texan. We don't like people telling us what to do. That whole kind of thing. And people go toe to toe. People go toe to toe with this fucker, and it's not like he's like, "Oh, you can't stop me," doing like impossible shit. It's like, no, there's some motherfuckers who stand up to this dude and hold their own, because he is just a person. He's just a really big guy. So
see what you did there.
What?
Hold their own.
They hold their own. But I thought it was pretty good. So some people may hate it. Some people may like it. There's been a lot of I'll say it's been very divisive. People have said like, this movie sucked. I've seen a lot of that. I've seen movies like, this movie is fucking amazing. So at least there's no middle ground. People are like,
that's how you know you've made a good film.
Yep.
When it's polarizing, when people either love it or hate it, and there's nothing in between. That's when you know it's good.
Right.
Or at least you did your job as a filmmaker.
All right. Let's see who is in the chat day. There's our Patreon banner. Get that fired up down there below. Apparently, Johnny said I was sounding a little far away. Am I sounding a little bit better now?
You're a little better now, yeah.
Okay, cool. I might have had my mic just a little bit too far away from me. I kind of readjusted it so that people could see my shirt, my new shirt.
Tag, you're it.
All right, let's say hi to whoever's in the chat. Then we will dive into the atrocities that we have decided to talk about tonight.
There's no we in this. This is a dictatorship, and look, it's all his fault. It's all his fault. Okay?
This is no longer a democracy.
It's a rictatorship.
It's a rictatorship. Coral. All right. First up was Donnie Does That was in the house. Good to see you, Donnie Does That. Good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Tony Regime is in the house. Good to see you, Tony Regime. Thank you so much. I see Sarcasm in the house, one of our amazing patrons. Thank you so much, Sarcasm. Thank you for being here. And Cindy Sue's in the house. Good to see you, Cindy Sue. Angel Rivera says, what up? What up, everybody? What up to you, Angel? Good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Travis Brown as well. Good to see you.
There's some weird Alex Peterson in the chat. We need to ban him.
Probably. I might have to time his ass out. Juice in the house says, hello, everyone. Ready to get scared stiff. Interesting choice of words given the films we're about to talk about tonight.
Yeah.
Definitely. Sir Little Wolf's in the house. Rue to you too. Charlie Welch is in the house. Good to see you, Charlie Welch. Says, yay, whores.
She's a whore.
I swear, I was tempted to, like, at one point start a podcast called Whores, Horses, and Horror. And just
unknown caller.
I forgot to turn my fucking phone off.
Stupid Siri.
Why is it 7:46 and I'm getting a spam call?
Because it's not 9:46.
This is true. Oh, Jinju, good to see you. Yep, Travis Brown's right. Tonight is full of horrors.
Yeah, from about second movie on, I think.
About the second movie on. This is true. Yeah. Logical Hillbilly's in the house. Good to see you, Logical Hillbilly. Thank you so much for being here. I know a lot of y'all have not seen a bunch of these films, but we're going to deep dive them. Travis Brown says, did not care for the new Texas Chainsaw movie.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. And I see Gosh of Heckfire in the house. Says, good evening, you sexy beast. Good evening to you, Gosh of Heckfire, one of our amazing patrons. Thank you so much, bud. Thank you for the support. And I see, there he is. Alex Page says, bro, she spent her whole life waiting for revenge. She had 50 years to get a hold of something other than a $50 shotgun from Walmart. She got what she deserved.
Spoiler alert. Alex, some of us haven't seen the movie yet, asshole.
Something other than a $50 shotgun from Walmart. Hey, I own that one.
Yeah, $50 shotguns at Walmart?
Back in the day, she bought it like 2 years after the incident.
Right. Cindy Sue, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And I see, who else I see pop in here? Alex says the opening scene was refreshing that they didn't take it in the typical direction that you were expecting. So I did, yeah. They got right into it. They wasted no time getting to the action because they know what it is.
Sir Little Wolf.
So Little Wolf out of here?
Yeah.
Yep. See ya.
Have a good one. Wrote no last names in the house. Good to see you. Gabba Gabba to you. And H. Jasper E, another one of our amazing patrons is in the house. Good to see you, H. Jasper E. Says hi, all JL, Aaron, Johnny, and the chat. Thank you so much for being here, bud. Skitch Crasher's in the house. Good to see you, Skitch Crasher. Hello to you. Tony Regime says, I paid good money to see the California Axe Massacre, which was billed as being gorier than Texas Chainsaw. And the only thing killed with an axe was a chicken. That's a shame.
How do you sell a chicken to a deaf man?
How?
Hey, would you like to buy a chicken? You haven't heard that one? God, it's so stupid.
I have not.
I can't believe you haven't heard this one. Like, yes, you have.
Mm-hmm. I may have, and I quickly forgot it.
Yeah.
Sir Little Wolf says 14 minutes in and now paying attention to all of us. Of course. Got to say hi to everybody. Absolutely. And I think I caught everybody. Let me scroll through. Oh, what Team Skeptic is in the house? Team Skeptic has deigned to join us. I am honored. I am honored to have my good friend Team all the way down in Texas popping in to say hello. Thank you so much, Team. I do appreciate it. And of course, NA, another one of our amazing patrons, is in the house. Good to see you, NA. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for being here. And Cindy Johnson as well. Thank you so much.
She is
good
just.
to see everybody. Huh?
She is just.
She is just.
I think that means she's holding us to like some sort of standard. Shit. All right. Best behaved, everybody.
Best behaved. Oh, yeah, yes. As much as it can be talking about these particular movies. Okay.
Well, we might as well just dive right into the cesspool of this film series. Only thing I'm going to say about the first one is I am deeply disappointed that it's a trauma film without buckets and buckets of green goo. So I pose this question: is it really a trauma film?
That's an interesting question. Very interesting question. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive deep right into this. So
I already said that.
I know I'm amping myself up. You cut me some fucking slack, man.
You gotta build yourself up.
I gotta build myself up to talk about this.
You need a new metaphor.
So we are going to talk about the Witchcraft franchise tonight. So the Witchcraft franchise began with the first Witchcraft film released March 2nd, 1989. And we are going to run through pretty much all of it tonight. Probably we're not going to dive. This was an interesting one because there's 16 films in this whole thing. So we are going to take a look at all the little bits and pieces of it. But each one of the films is pretty much the same schlock kind of plot. And we may touch on some plot points here, but mostly it's going to be about this franchise and the things going on behind it throughout. So if you're not familiar with the Witchcraft franchise, okay, so the do what?
What?
Say it again.
Consider yourself lucky.
Yes, consider yourself very, very lucky.
Yeah.
So the film begins with the first Witchcraft film. The very first Witchcraft film was directed by Rob Spera and starred Annette Topol, Gary Sloan, Mary Shelley, Elizabeth Stockton, Deborah Scott, Alexander Kirkwood, and Ross Newton. And the screenplay was written by Jody Savin. And it was the only one of the Witchcraft franchise to actually see a theatrical release. So the film itself... typically the mythology, like the entire mythology of the Witchcraft series, starts with the birth of the birth of William. And Grace Churchill discovers that her husband and her mother-in-law plan to use the child as a means to bring about the end of the world. The husband and mother-in-law are evil witches. They worship Satan, and Grace tries to do everything she can to prevent their evil plan from coming to fruition. And it starts out that basically William and his mother survive the first film, and then they carry on. But the franchise pretty much from that point on centers around William and the powers that were kind of like bestowed upon him to be an evil warlock, and how he is raised to believe in good and to use his powers for good, while the forces of darkness are constantly around him trying to, seduce him. And it gets into the real seductive stuff later on in the franchise, but seduce him to the dark side and use his powers for evil and bring about the apocalypse and so on and so forth. Essentially, that's pretty much the breakdown of the entire thing. The production behind these little films, first and foremost, I could say, deeply cheap, so cheap. I think I was.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't you calculate for the entire film franchise?
For all 16 films over the 38 years of this entire franchise, the combined total budget, I think, was a little bit less than $500,000.
God.
Less than $500,000 and 16 movies over 38 years.
That's even factoring in a wee bit of inflation, that's still tiny. You couldn't get one decent movie made for that. At least not with what they're messing with.
So as the
thing about this series is that the first one wasn't that bad.
It wasn't terrible. It straight up was. Honestly, I was watching this and was like, it was a bummer because it was a trauma produced film. This was a straight rip of Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it was. And I was like, it's almost virtually the exact same story. It's just, it ends better than Rosemary's Baby. And had some kind of goofy. It didn't go heavy in the gore. It was more just like the imagery of like, ooh, Satanism. What people consider to be Satanism, with all the pentagrams and candles and sacrificial daggers and statues of Baphomet and shit like that. Essentially, that's all it is. It's the two witches, the husband and wife, who are essentially gaslighting the mother into thinking she's going crazy so that they can get the baby away from her and eventually use it to bring about the apocalypse.
Well, they didn't even show the kills on most of them. If you watch, they don't show the strike. Like, they never show it piercing skin and everything. Right. It's always the weapon coming down and they flash to him, like with the butler with a spike sticking out of his mouth. That's easy enough, cheap enough to fake. But then at the end, they have the entire corpse melting scene for two of them. And like, did you save the entire special effects budget just for that?
And even that was done pretty cheesy.
Yeah,
it was
because it didn't show anything extreme. It would cut away and then would
well,
cut back to him, and then
like this whole misty thing and smoke and whatnot. Then
it was a Wolfman effect where they change it frame by frame, and then they just progress like that. It wasn't actually melting in time. So the gore wasn't heavy. And the thing that killed me too is the entire time you're waiting for them to really get into what's going on with the kid. Like, is this going to be, raising Damien? But the only thing you see of the kid is they bring home a newborn that's basically a toddler. They can barely keep the kid in one arm. But beyond that, the rest of the time, it's just like a cradle. They don't pick him up that much. He doesn't do that much. It's just everything surrounding her. So I think that really hurt it not getting into what's going on with him.
Well, I think they were going with what worked. Rosemary's Baby script worked, so they're essentially telling the exact same story, so no need to change anything beyond that.
Right.
Yeah, but in Rosemary's Baby, the kid wasn't there for the vast majority of the movie. This, we're working with the opposite, where the kid comes around at the beginning of the movie, and he's a MacGuffin. He's not treated like a living thing.
So as the entire franchise progresses, so Spanner continues to resist temptation, encountering all manner of dark forces, other witches, warlocks, vampires, all kinds of crazy shit. Eventually becomes a lawyer, and then goes on to become kind of like an unofficial consultant for the LAPD, and it works within their varying characters that pop up throughout it. William Spanner is the main character of the series. He's not in movies 8 and 10. Technically, he's only an infant in the first film. He dies at the end of the 7th film and is dead through the 8th film, resurrected in the 9th. So he pulls like a Jason around that time. He doesn't appear in the 10th movie, which follows characters that were set up previously and goes on like a side quest with other characters. And though he's referenced in that one, then he comes back and then he takes on in the final, then he comes back through the rest. His girlfriend Kelly constantly pops up every once in a while. She disappears after the 11th film and is never mentioned again. And then through the 14th, 15th, and 16th films, he pretty much it goes kind of, let's see, 14th and 15. He's taken on it's like we're a connected trilogy, and he takes on this like coven, and then of course the 16th film goes full meta, and basically tries to use the cheapness of the franchise and poke fun at itself. It tries to basically pull a Scream where it is laughing at itself in that respect. But that's the basic mythology of it. William Spanner has taken on the forces of darkness, trying not to be tempted to use his powers for evil and bring about the apocalypse and be a good guy. The production history of this, and you can tell because Troma was in charge of the first 9 films of these, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I didn't get into the production as much as I like as far as like movie by movie. I kind of looked the overall. I know the last 3 were done by Epoch Films, something like that. And then, like you said, early on it was Troma, even though it didn't feel like Troma.
Right, it was weird. Well, once it got into the UK Pie, good to see you, UK Pie. Thank you so much for being here. So the first 9 were produced by Troma, and while Johnny was correct, they don't feel like Troma films. That was the thing that got me going through each and every one of them. The kind of like the TNA as that increased and slowly descended into ultimately like softcore pornography is where the franchise eventually goes with some horror elements. But that's the part that felt kind of Troma-ish because it's cheap, it's gaudy, it's exploitative. The sex scenes don't look realistic at all. They're like the sex scene in The Room, where the guy is like a mile away from her and they're out of sync, and it's just really, really silly and cheap. Lots of T, lots of A, but nothing too extreme. And then, of course, Armadillo Films took over production after Troma. After the 9th film, they produced the 10th film. And the 11th and 12th film, actually, I think it might have been Armadillo between 10, 11, and 12. Tripod Films did the 13th film, and then David Sterling Productions took over that for the 14th and the 16th films. Essentially what it's so. And the wild thing about that is you get wildly different, production mentalities behind each one. Each one, essentially, when a new production company took over the franchise, it was adding a new entry. they would double down on what was done before and just go further and further and further into the sexploitative and goofiness, and it just essentially got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So, but wildly managed to keep everything interconnected. So it's weird to see this.
The closest thing I can think of as in relation to it is the Chinese and other countries, big time in China, they will buy up older US brands like London Fog. Everybody remembers London Fog. But what they do is they buy it, they bring it over there, they stick the label on clothing they're already planning to make, and people think, oh, this is American, so this is great.
Right.
And basically all they're buying is a title with some background they can play with, and then they're sticking onto it what they want to. And that's, you kind of see that too, is where there's not this, and I don't think anybody can maintain it 16 films down the line, but there's not this overarching thread going through them. There's kind of a feeling to it, like you said, he becomes a detective. It's sort of like, is it Harry D'Amour? That's from the Clive Barker. He's in the Lord of Illusions and some of the books and stuff, Supernatural Detective, sort of Constantine thing. But beyond that, there's not a through line that they really stick to. Just kind of kicks around, and each person does what they want to with it.
Yeah, pretty much just follows William and going through, because I think when the second one picks up, he's pretty much, it kind of like, he's unaware of the events of the first film. He's unaware that he's been adopted, and it was weird because they kind of changed it. See, that was what the strange thing was. In order to maintain it kind of follows the character, but elements around it, because in the first one, he's not aware that of the events of the first movie. In the second one, and then he's with his adopted parents. His adopted parents stole him away from Coven, but he was already saved from the Satanists in that one. So
yeah, there were only two of them.
Yeah, really. So little bit itty bitty changes are made throughout, and then you see grand switches in the overall production mentality, the amount of money willing to be spent, and the amount and the actors, the actors that they're willing to cast. Not to denigrate any of them, but certain actors will not do certain things, and you need certain kind of mentalities in order to pull off movies like this. So you look at that, and then every single time it changes hands, while they're still keeping it intact, they are ultimately changing it. So you will get different vibes. Once they break away from Trauma, it kind of became anybody's game. And as long as you were willing to, I guess, pay for the rights to use the name, then, or because the production company would buy it and they would sell it off. As long as you're willing to pay for the rights to get the name, you could produce under that name, and as long as you have that same character, you could do whatever you want. In the 16th film, it was odd because they set it up so that if they do sell off the franchise to anybody else, anybody could pick it up, and they explained why the actors keep changing. They explained why these things take place. They're poking fun at themselves. So they basically set it up that anybody else could pick this up and run with it and do whatever they want. And it's okay to do that.
Well, and it's building a brand value on it because they became known for TNA. So if you've got some money and you think you can assemble a cast, but you need, people to know up front what they're going to be looking at, maybe that's exactly what you want. It's just that, and then tack on whatever you want to onto it to make it into the crap film that some teenage kid's gonna sneak off a VHS shelf. I mean, because that
VHS.
Yeah, well,
come on, Grandpa.
Well, the earlier era was, though, if you look at it,
that's the key. That's the key. I
3 years older than me.
I only think that this franchise survived because of VHS.
Yeah.
Because these were the movies that
were
easy.
The reason why VHS beat out Betamax, right?
Because of the adult industry picking it. It's cheaper. I mean, anybody was going to pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason why Blu-ray beat out HD DVD is because the porn industry pretty much chose. Everybody was saying, "Oh, because Sony decided to go with Blu-ray." It's like, no. It's because the porn industry decided to go with Blu-ray, and the porn industry decides what medium is going to go forward because that's the one that people are going to be buying. So, shockingly, not a lot of people understand how influential the porn industry is on the direction of home media.
Yeah. Well, and when you don't have internet access, you can get what you can get. Kids are not kids, but teenagers and younger males are gonna be looking on the VHS shelves at the rental store I mean, once the internet came along, things changed, which is why you're not seeing as many movies like this. And before that, it was all in theaters that most people didn't want to be spotted at.
I think we do see a lot of movies like this. It's the same type of underground movement that this first one, like the Witchcraft series was. You'll still find these sexploitation style films, and if Eugene were here, he would tell you that we were the unfortunate victims of one such sexploitation type film. The Last Rack Focus. Yeah, that look that you just gave doesn't even begin to describe the horrors. And not in like, oh man, it's a really good horror movie. No.
I mean, people's the censorship and the standards around that have relaxed so much at this point that it's just like,
well, so here's the thing.
Pointless to go there.
The beauty part about so censorship. If you don't put your film to the MPAA, you don't have to worry. You can do whatever you want. Whatever you want in your film. You don't have to worry about it. Doesn't matter. You just put it out there as it goes unrated.
Tony Regime says, that's the reason VR hasn't done so well. You need to be 110% certain you won't be disturbed before watching VR Prawn.
And even then, you better be.
Yes, and Rhoda No Last Name is correct. The reason Prawn went VHS is the tech licensing for mass reproduction was far cheaper.
Yep.
Yeah, and it made the cassettes easier or cheaper and easier to buy too,
right,
and to store and to ship and everything else. Quality was down, but that genre has never worried about video quality.
And I'm honest, and I'm willing. I would put money down there. The whole reason the franchise was able to survive was because there were a number of companies, predominantly at the time in the 80s, and the early 90s. There was a company called Scimitar, which essentially, looking into them, Scimitar was like the king of like low budget VHS. They could churn out VHSs like wham, bam, 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 bam.
Yep.
And stock shelves really, really quickly by getting these things out there. And so this was one of those ones you'd come across, you'd see kind of like an evocative cover. And when you're at Blockbuster or Hollywood Video and you're kind of going, what's this? And then you kind of see that. And if you're bored or whatever, you're like, maybe I'll give this one. All right. So, and that's the key there. Quick, mass, cheap distribution, cheap budget. And all you need is like 1,000 people to rent it across the nation to wherever, VHS movies are being rented from. All you need is 1,000 people to do it, and you can get your budget back. Or maybe 10,000 people do it, and you can get your budget back. And all you do is throw a cover on it.
Some people are picking up like the bargain movies from the bins at their local video stores and whatnot.
Right.
Well, it's, hey, Witchcraft, let's buy this one, see what's up, and then
Well, and you've got two, like I think I saw it come up on a couple of searches as the Witchboard came out, not on top of it, but around the same time. And some of the covers are similar to other things and stuff like that. So they kind of cadged off of other movies that did better.
So if you look at the 80s and 90s, if you look at the 80s and 90s film, right? And this is all film, not just horror film, but horror film is probably a little bit more true than like drama or action, but it closely resembles the vinyl trade of the 70s and 80s, right? You would go to your music store and you would pick up a vinyl, and most people would buy the vinyl based on the cover art.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happened with film or movies in the 80s and 90s. Because think about it, man. You guys are most of our audience are old enough to remember going into like a Blockbuster Video or even your mom and pop, video rental store and
Family Video
or Hollywood Video or Bucky's Bumpy Video. I don't know if it is, but walking down the horror aisles, and what would catch your attention? What's the one that you guys remember the most from those visits?
The one that always stuck out in my mind was always Evil Dead 2.
Evil Dead 2, exactly.
Yeah.
Why? Because here's this fucking skull with eyeballs in it. That shit.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? It imprints on you, stuff like that. That's what would draw your attention. And then after that, you would start looking at other boxes that were pretty cool. You look at Hellraiser and you turn the back and you look at the back art and you see the tongue guy hanging from his tongue and, the hooks and shit and all that. You're like, oh, fucking hell. It's just like this. That's what people would buy their movies on, because it wasn't like we could just go YouTube and check out the trailer or check out a review on this thing. We didn't have that, so we had to go based on what we could see. So, I mean,
you had at the beginning of them, you would have the trailers play out, but those are really in line with the production company. So it's just like you said.
What I mean is we didn't have the ability to just, you know.
You couldn't just pull up a review, especially on a horror movie, because it's not like Siskel and Ebert are going to be watching this movie and reviewing.
Right.
I mean, Roger Ebert would have thrown up in his own lap. He can't stand or couldn't stand the genre.
That was a lot of the general consensus of this particular franchise, starting from pretty much 2 on, is that the idea was that they would create an evocative cover and not worry about like the film in and of itself, because all they needed to do was just recoup some sort of profit on this super cheap film. And they knew that just by sticking it in an alluring box, you throw it up on their shelf, and then people just out of like curiosity will pick it up and go, "Oh, what's this about?" And then say, "Oh, this is right." Well, they already they got your money. Yeah.
And the beauty part about that is you only have to do that 2 or 3 times in a row to get people like, you know what, I'm going to check out this next video. I'm going to check out this next movie just because I have to. It's like that. It's that running meme, like the joke. How bad can it be? How bad is it going to get? So then once you get there, they get invested in the shit show. Like look at Sharknado. This is they're about to be the 7th film. In Sharknado,
I hope
I don't even keep track of those anymore.
People, the same way, like sci-fi tried to make Sharknado or like a serious movie, and people laughed at it. But so
it
much
made money.
It made a lot of money, and so much so that they watched the 2nd, then the 3rd, and the 4th with no expectations other than this is going to be just some crazy shit. And then we got Al Roker getting eaten by fucking sharks in the middle of the Today set. Like, what the fuck? Where's this come from?
They lost me when Ian Ziering dove head first with a chainsaw into a great white's mouth.
That was the first one.
That's where the franchise lost me. I was like, no. It almost lost me with Tara Reid being an intellectual. Tara Reid in any intellectual role, I'm not going to buy it.
I can't even spell the word intellectual.
And I mean, they lost me when they tried to pull that shit in Alone in the Dark, and I'm like, you what? You're not an archaeologist. And then she goes to do this, and then I was like, okay, Ian Ziering's got the chainsaw, and like really died. Okay, Henry Winkler is just like dancing. Jump the shark in a shark movie. That was just beyond ridiculous.
Yeah. When you're going to be self-referential, don't point out that you're being like self-referential.
But the point is, people will get. That's the reason why the Witchcraft series can have 16 movies, because people I've watched the first 15, might as well watch the 16.
At that point, they're invested. It's a sunk cost fallacy.
Right, exactly. The Puppet Master series has 17 films in the Puppet Master series. People are going to watch it if they put it on.
I'm still watching them.
Yeah, they're going to watch them.
Because you never know. You never know if you're comparing something like this to the Puppet Master franchise. Puppet Master franchise was slowly going downhill because Full Moon Pictures, it seemed like they didn't give a crap. They were just running the same shtick over, and then all of a sudden they dropped The Littlest Reich. And I was like, holy shit. Someone got a hold of this franchise and said, you know what? No more of this nonsense. We're going back to it. And we're going back to what makes this franchise solid from the very first few films, like the first 3 films. We're going back to the horror elements and making something. I was like, fucking A. And, I've been watching ever since. It's doing its roller coaster thing again where it's going down again. But I'm like, fuck it. Because you never know. You get that one director that really, really appreciates and really respects the franchise, says, you know what, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to take this in another direction and really reinvigorate it. And fortunately, that happened with Puppet Master. That has not happened with this franchise at all.
The franchise seems to be the Sharknado, the original Sharknado, just how bad is it going to get? Well,
you say reinvigorate, and there was no vigor in this series in the first place to replace.
Well, I mean, again, the first film wasn't terrible. There was an idea there that somebody tried to bring to life, and it wasn't received very well, obviously, because look what happened to it. Same again. We'll go back to the Sharknado reference. It's just so poorly done,
right? So
poorly executed. Even if you're going to be a ripoff of Rosemary's Baby and The Omen, and even a little bit of doesn't matter, who fucking cares? If you're going to rip these films off, do a little bit better in your presentation, because there's some genuinely creepy moments in this first film, but they're so poorly used. Like the butler, like that guy's fucking creepy.
Dude was creepy.
And
as a matter of fact, they actually caught me. I actually thought it was the butler that killed the friend. You know, they cut her head off, lopped her head off, and I was like, "Oh, the butler did it." He was like, "Oh," because earlier in the movie, I don't think twice, she's like, "Oh, you scared the shit out of me," and it's the butler. Oh, the creepy butler, you rang. And then I was like, "Oh, it's the butler. The butler killed her. We're gonna find out the butler's in on it." It's like, no, it was. I was like, "Oh shit, butler's a good guy."
Yeah, the butler was trying to protect people. That's why he didn't want to go to those rooms. No, you need to stay away from there because those are dangerous, and we're trying to save your life. But
right.
I feel like the butler could have said, "Hey, let me get this baby out of here."
Yeah.
not waiting to the very, very last second.
Well, that's what kind of got me is that I kind of saw that coming. I knew it was a possibility when she gave him the flower and everything. I was like, please don't tell me he's switching alignment for a flower. And then come final scene.
It's not just any flower. It was a white flower.
Yeah, no, I'm like,
wrote it no last name with a little Jan Silent Bob. This is gonna make Witchcraft 7 look like Puppet Master 12. That's brilliant. So and interesting. So diving into the individual movies, the first 9, and interesting that you brought this up, Johnny. Like the first 9 films. Interesting that you brought this up because we can roll all of these up into one thing because these were all trauma films.
Yep.
So Trauma, Who We Love, Class of Nukem High, The Toxic Avenger, Poultrygeist, all of your splattery, gooey, goofy, low budget, not intended to be anything more than what they are, never take themselves seriously. And here we are, we have this one, and then it descends very, very quickly from the second one on pretty much into TNA and then pretty much into softcore pornography.
It seems as if, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your
no, and then it descends into that, which, while the TNA is kind of a hallmark of trauma, because they'll go the sexploitative and they'll go the gooey, gory nastiness. It didn't really have, I mean, even in the first 9, while it progressively got more sexploitative instead of the gooey, gory nastiness, and like you said, I was going off what you said, it really doesn't feel like Trauma Productions, which led me to think this was, while it was produced by Trauma didn't have a lot of say in what was going on. This may have just been an alternative revenue stream going into Trauma, because basically we'll put money in and you guys can make the movie and then we'll get a cut of that while we work on the shit that we want to work on. That's like classic Trauma shit.
See, for me, it seems more like this was Trauma's way of making a little bit more serious of a film, and it didn't work out. So they kind of just fell back onto what they were like used to, the sexploitation and the gooey, nasty stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wrote in no last name. Tits are cheaper than fake blood. It's true. You're blowing your annual budget. All these other movies, all we can afford are tits.
Tits.
No end of burgeoning actresses that want to make their mark and willing to take their tops off. So fuck it.
Mm-hmm. But no, that's what it seems like. It seems as if Trauma was trying to make a serious film, or at least a more serious film than they used to make, or that they were used to making. It didn't work out, so they didn't know what else to do. So they kind of just fell back to their, well, this is what we've done in the past and it's worked for us. So maybe this is where we need to go with it.
Failure to diversify, basically, which
Pretty much.
Can't blame them for doing that because you want to stay resilient. And the cult around Trauma was growing at that point, but I don't think it even come near crescendo level where you knew what you were getting with a Trauma film, but people weren't completely celebrating it. So I think they probably came out of the fact that they hadn't realized that they need to stick with what they know. And that all of the films feel that way. The first one's not as bad, where they just couldn't decide which direction they wanted to go, and they never pushed like really, really hard in any one direction.
One thing I'll give them credit, or one thing I will give a little bit of credit for, is that in the sense that I got from the first 9 films is overall it was the character of William. So their long-running character, William, who didn't appear in 2 films because they were doing other things. He died, and then they brought him back, and they resurrected. And then, of course, in the 11th film, when he just wasn't in it, that was like a side deal where he's referenced, but that was following side characters that were going on their own adventure. So it kind of expanding the universe out in that respect. But in this particular one, I kind of got the vibe. It felt very similar to what, not to compare it, I guess comparing it to like, poor filmmaking, but the Twilight films. Because the Twilight films, as far as character development goes, what those characters were, what Edward Cullen, what Bella is, and all those other characters, the reason those became so popular, especially with young audiences, because, like my friend Cody likes to say, is like essentially their pants. It's a generic hero that's facing one particular crisis, trying to do one particular obstacle to overcome, but there's not a lot of depth to it. And none of these, the characters ever, like, you never really go into anything deeper with the character of William. No matter who's playing him, no one brings anything further to it to kind of make it interesting like that. But because of the constant battle that his character is constantly going through and everything that he faces and all the different legions of darkness that he's constantly taking on, any young male horror fan can watch this movie and easily slip on those pants. So what Troma crafted in those first 9 movies is essentially a hero of 1,000 faces, a hero that anybody could jump into and be like, oh, I could do that, or I would see that, or I would act this way, and like that. I could see myself in the situation doing this. That was easily wearable by anybody that watched it. And I thought that was one another thing that kind of led to its enduring success, is because they've never gone farther into the film as far as mythology, or as far as trying to build up anything, or major character arcs. None other than his death and his resurrection, it never occurs. But other than that, it's pretty much just 80s man dealing with evil, or then early 90s man dealing with evil.
You would think, and I'm going to say this one thing, and then Aaron, I'll turn it over to you, but you would think that after 16 films, we would have some sort of legitimate backstory on this whole thing, and we don't.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, he's an empty tit magnet for the plot to revolve around. I mean, I get what you're saying, because you can see too where you're talking about Twilight and stuff, where they just borrow as stuff goes along. But
well, I was going to make the illusion that it's kind of like Prawn. I was going to make the illusion it's kind of like Prawn, where you kind of envision yourself as the guy. Well, it essentially goes along the same way. Is that you have him in these situations, you put him in these scenarios where there's like, ooh, there's sexiness and there's titties and monsters that look hot and shit like this, and I have all these powers and stuff. And so it essentially becomes the pizza guy knocking on the door, and then the sorority girls, they can't pay. It's that kind of fantasy thing. It's essentially what they were banking on. And so here comes the hero. What's going to befall the hero today? What creatures of the night is he going to encounter? And then bang, and then ultimately vanquish. Shit like that is essentially where I think they banked on that, and that helped it to survive. And that came from the first 9 movies that Troma was developing. They never went too far with it. I think what hurt it ultimately is that, similar to the Twilight films, is that it took itself too seriously. That it was trying to be like, we have a serious, this is a serious narrative, and maybe it was Troma trying to be like, yeah, we're trying to make something serious here instead of the goofy, slapsticky, gross out stuff that we normally do. Tries to do a little more, but I don't think anybody could break Lloyd out of that. So, given it how many,
why would you want to though, right?
No, he's a master.
Like telling, it's like telling the greatest baseball player or the greatest pitcher, no, don't do that anymore. Do something different. No,
his history of Troma films, if you ever read it, is amazing, because he straight up acknowledges that, like, we've got $5 for making a movie, that it is just schlock, and the book has the feeling to it. I mean, that he oozes that, and having a Troma film without that in it's just sad. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Yeah, you can't. Again, that's why I'd rather that they would have diversified under a different name instead of calling it a Troma film, or Troma Productions.
Well, they learned quickly, and they learned
quickly. They put out 9 fucking movies.
No. They learned quickly that theatrical releases were not going to sustain anything. That they had to go home video, and that's essentially and when you consider the late 80s and early 90s, the advent of VHS, and VHS was everywhere. I still have shit tons of VHS in my personal collection, because as long as you take care of them, they don't wear out. It's like cassettes. Cassettes work, magnetic tape. It's super easy. And so that mass production level, and so that's where witchcraft eventually found its home. Like where young horror fans can come across as, I haven't watched this yet, and then all of a sudden they have their kind of like, I think that this was the guilty pleasure of a lot of people. More people, obviously 16 movies, more people watch this shit than I think would be willing to admit it. And they slowly but surely, it was like, oh, there's no one out. Okay, shit.
Yeah, you say that though. They were making, they would do what, 3 for $25,000 total.
That was the final trilogy. Yeah, it was $25,000, and they shot all 3 back to back to back.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, this is the movie that 50-year-old Stevie goes with his mom to the rental store, and he's not going to go in the back room with the beaded curtain, separating it from the rest of the store. But he's like, Mom, it's just a horror movie. So they go to bed and he's up late, or he's got a VCR in his room, and suddenly they're like, why are we out of tissues? I mean,
oh wow! Ruin Last Name said a first printing of the Terminator VHS sold at auction for $32,000 this week.
Jesus Christ!
I'm not surprised.
That's why. Well, the boxes are the things that you got to take care of. Make sure they don't get hurt. Wildest thing, Johnny and I both saw it, was a guy who got an original beta Friday the 13th autographed, and I can't remember who he got it autographed by, but
Tom Savini.
By Tom Savini, original, mint condition beta copy of Friday the 13th was pretty wild. That was
plastic or a cardboard case.
He had it in a Lexan box.
Yeah.
God.
So
I would
to like protect it.
Yeah, a lot of the betas, they came in that plastic case that you couldn't damage. Is the high density stuff. So I'm not surprised that one lasted. But
so going along it, one thing I will say, and it was after the Trauma run, because Trauma has their own kind of mentality on it. I think at this point, the first one wasn't so bad. I think the most money they ever spent on any one particular film was the second film, which was $80,000, and then of course the budget's depleted after that because they dumped a bunch of money into the second film. Second film went nowhere, and then of course you've got the third one. They did Kiss of Death, they did Virgin Heart, Dance with the Devil, Devil's Mistress, Judgment Hour, Salem's Ghost, Bitter Flesh, and Mistress of the Craft. Bitter Flesh. Then, of course, it changes hands. It goes to Mistress of the Craft, which was, I think, the cheapest out of all, which was $16,000 they produced that one for. And that wasn't Trauma.
$16,300.
$16,300, yeah.
Less than minimum wage.
So by the time the 10th film has come out, 10 years have gone by. They pretty much released one every single year up until 1997. Then it changed hands. They dropped one in 1998. And then it would be a couple years until Witchcraft 11 came out, which is Sisters of Blood, and that came out in 2000. But at that point right there, it was after Trauma, and then it was picked up for the 10th one for Mistress of the Craft. That was directed by Elisar Cabrera, directed and written by Elisar Cabrera, and starring Stephanie Beaton, Wendy Cooper, and Eileen Daly. That particular one I think is where things begin, where the mentality begins to change, because this one doesn't have William in it, and it focuses on predominantly the girls, where this became more female centric, and they really. What is this? Cindy Sousa's jail bragging about having VHS now was like people bragging they still have beta in the late 90s. This is true. But this is where it really changed. And the genre kind of began to bend. And I found this to be really, really interesting, because the one thing about horror movies, about the horror genre, is you can interlate, you can cross it, hybridize it with any other genre. Horror adventure, horror comedy, horror drama, horror romance, horror whatever, horror comedy. You can cross it with anything else, and you can put elements in there. And as long as you have your horror notes, as long as you have those particular notes, it can qualify as a horror film. But this right here was where the genres really began to bend, and they started really, once it was out of Trauma's hands, they started really, really torquing it around. And you begin to see, because 10 years have passed, it's 1998, we're heading towards the new millennium, Y2K is on the horizon. But at that point, late 90s, mentalities began to change, not only about horror, but also about sexploitation, about low budget crap, about indie films. Technology was getting cheaper. more and more people can get their hands on technology, on decent cameras, on decent equipment. And all of a sudden, it's not like it takes a full-on studio, even though it's super cheap. It's only $16,000 to do a movie. It's still the studio. It's still effectively a production. But nowadays, 1998, you don't need to do that. Okay? People are, the technology is getting cheaper and getting into more people's hands, more and more indie producers coming up and producing better quality stuff, and Witchcraft gets knocked down a little bit further down, kind of like almost to the underground, where now they have to start getting creative with the stories they tell and maybe show a bit more TNA, slide over maybe a little bit more comedy, a little bit more softcore pornography in order to keep some sort of semblance of an audience. So I think it was the changing times where only because this was a horror genre was it able to adapt and try to hold on to some sort of cult following in order to keep itself alive. Although this would have gone the way of the dodo.
Well, there's also other events going on at that, along that same era, because you're talking about the late 90s and everything. And Anne Rice had kind of thrown a spark on a fire back in the 80s.
Vampires became sexy.
Yeah,
right.
Vampires and witches and all that. And you had some people have heard of them, some haven't. It's Laurel K. Hamilton. She wrote a lot of books about that sort of thing that include witchcraft and everything. And then Wicca started to pick up. There were a lot of Wiccan authors, because I used to be pagan. And I converted in a little bit later in that area to paganism, but I'd studied, the occult and everything. And that started right about that time, because a lot of people were getting into that. You saw more showing up on the shelves of B. Dalton and everything like that. So I think it probably used the popularity of that to pull itself along, because the cover always has that pentagram, whichever you want to call it.
Right.
Emblazoned on the front to pull your attention in, and it's the same tactic you would see in books on witchcraft.
That's an interesting point that you bring up. Now, so in 1998, vampires were becoming sexy. The ideas of them, as far as culturally speaking, they were no longer so much monsters. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was out. That came out in 1996. The first movie came out, I believe, in 94. So the ideas around vampires were changing, and so this capitalized on that, because this was the first one to bring vampires into it. And you brought that up. That's an excellent point, because I think going back into the first 9, it started out 1988. The Satanism, witches, warlocks, spellcrafting, blah blah like this. Because at the time period, I think it was hot on the heels of the Satanic Panic of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So because that was a hot thing, and Trauma saw the opportunity to try and capitalize on something. Boom, we can put this out there, and the pentacles on the cover, and there's a big pentacle in witchcraft, and it's people still have that fresh in their minds, even though nothing ever came of that. It was still hot in the media's mind, so anybody was kind of like, ooh, interesting. They say a movie about the devil and blah 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 like that, because everybody's thinking about it. At this point, 10 years later, it's a footnote in history. Everybody knows that nothing really took place during that time period. But vampires are becoming the new kind of thing. And so enter in vampires into the Witchcraft franchise, bringing these monsters into it. So now we have warlocks, witches, and now we have vampires. And that pretty much is kind of where it stayed, was magic and vampires from their end, but constantly toying with the genre in and of itself in order to adapt to changing mentalities. Not to mention the empowered female.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, is you also, so originally, you had to go to theater if you wanted adult film, and then it moved on to VHS, and now we're moving into the internet era. So I think it left more of an opening too on VHS for something that was a little less porn and a little more erotica. And I think then, I'm not going to say they did a good job of that. I won't say that at all, but I think that's kind of where they were trying to trend in the market too. By changing it and making it a little more female-centric and being about them instead of the slip-on glove of a guy.
Right. And I think ultimately that shows the resilience of the genre in and of itself, and why no matter what, as long as you have those horror elements, because like we've always talked about many times, that horror, the genre in and of itself is a reflection of the kind of, I would say it's more like a barometer as to what is ailing society at the time. That will always riff upon what people are currently afraid of. It will take the hot topics that are scary, and it will turn them into something, and it basically, take it to its extreme, bring in monsters, being whatever, but the themes of it will always be something that is prevalent to society at that time, whether it's talking about the virtuous final girl overcoming evil, throughout pretty much the slasher genre, or scary psychological horror, when people begin to realize that real life monsters are closer than you might think, that you never really know, who's living next door to you, throughout the 80s and the 90s, that even your friends could be bad because you never know what anybody's really thinking. Once these things become topics in society, like prevalent topics in society, then all of a sudden horror riffs off those. And essentially this is where the witchcraft genre was going, because it's all it can do, thankfully, because of the resiliency of the horror genre, and why we will always have scary movies, because that's how we deal with shit. That's how whether it's vicarious or whether it's just to, internalize things so that you can make them more manageable in an emotional sense. That's why the genre is so important. And its ability to take on different forms and, absorb other genres and, kind of flip around like that. Its malleability is the reason why these things could still maintain life, because we're still only up to 1998, and this goes to 2016. Another 18 years of witchcraft films are going to follow this, and that's the enduring legacy of this. I think only because of the horror genre, absolutely, despite the fact that they really are made for a particular clientele, a particular audience base.
Well, you can say that's all horror genre, or the bulk of horror genre, especially from the probably late 70s on until maybe even the early 2000s. That horror didn't start to expand its target audience outside of teenage boys until probably the late 2000s.
Well, it's because we started growing up, so the kids that had to get 1 tape, 2 tapes at the store when their parents wanted to get rentals, per week, all of a sudden we've got money. As we're becoming adults, we want more of that. So you've got the ease of production, you've got the added market, and it exploded for better or worse.
And Ronald Sam brought up Skinamax horror, and that's actually, I know he's making a joke there, but Skinamax horror, but essentially all cable horror. As cable companies became bigger and they were able to reduce their prices, more people had access to premium cable channels, HBO, Showtime, Cinemax. And all their budgets get bigger, and they're able to start producing stuff themselves. And so I think that we're going to get there eventually, where if somebody picks up the Witchcraft franchise, the only place it can go is VOD. That if there is a Witchcraft 17, it's eventually going to be video on demand, because it's pretty much followed along from VHS to DVD from theater to VHS to DVD, and I think VOD is the only place it could possibly have a home now.
I think
it's going to have instant distribution.
I think he's going to have to land on Prime, because as it stands, the movies the latest ones are on Tubi, and Tubi cuts a lot. They don't go too deep into, I won't say adult themes. They don't show a great majority of nude scenes from stuff like that. They cut them. So knowing that, and knowing that Netflix is going to demand a somewhat higher quality product and all the others, right, Prime will take anything. And that's probably where it's going to appear.
So let's look at this one major thing. Despite the fact that the films themselves that make up this entire franchise, they're cheap. They are typically amortized. You can use the sets off of one, use it for the next one, which is essentially what they did with the final trilogy. Overall, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this, and of course in the live chat as well. And I see all the love for Buffy the Vampire Slayer in there as well, because she presented it finally a smart female hero, and yes, SMG was hot as fuck. I had a huge crush on Sarah Michelle Gellar for the longest time.
What teenage kid didn't, or teenage boy didn't during that time?
I know. And the kicker on this one is that there is an appeal, and there will be, I think, a lasting appeal that will never go away for the trashy and the cheap.
Well, there's something to be said about. We touched on this before, talking about things like Sharknado and the reason why there are 17 in this, or 16 in this series, and 17 in the Puppet Master. Those things that, once the movie industry gets you right, they get you into it. You're more willing to look at these movies, and then you start to revere them, right? Like, holy shit, for a schlock trash movie, they're pretty cool. It's a lot of fun to watch to see how bad they're going to be, or see this or see that. You know what I mean? To see the progression of these films, and people get invested in them. They get personally invested in them, where it doesn't matter. Like, I can tell you right now, it didn't matter how many Puppet Master movies come out. Once one comes out, I'm gonna see it. I'm going to watch it because I remember watching those from way back when in the 80s. And watching everything when Puppet Masters are cool. Let's check out this movie. Let's check out the next Puppet Master. Let's check it out. Check it out. It's just one of those things. We like these things. Those hidden gems that you're going to find that are just trash, but you don't give a shit because it's it only works in the horror genre. Like, you can talk about
that is odd. Yeah, it's the only genre it works for. You try to do this with anything else, and it doesn't even work for comedy.
That's what I'm saying. If you look at like Samurai Cop and The Room and stuff like that, those are terrible movies. With the exception of Neil Breen films, he's the only one who's been able to do it. You know what I mean? And I think it's just because he's too bored, I guess, to stop. But
just doesn't know what to do when he wakes up in the morning, so he goes out and
makes crap. Write a shitty movie and then film it.
Well, and that's the big sin too, because we've talked about it before. You can do it so bad it's good, but don't be boring. You can suck, but don't ever be boring, and that's what kills a lot of them. And that came and went in this series. Like, even within a movie, you would go from dead standstill to laughing because the special effects are just horrible.
Yeah, and that's the thing. People talk, they're laughing at the film. At least they're laughing.
Yeah.
They're talking shit about the film. At least they're talking about the film.
It's eliciting some kind of a reaction.
Exactly.
And that's essentially what makes trauma. It's still the trauma formula. Even at this point, when you're this far into it, when you're into like 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, it's still the trauma mentality. And the thing that makes trauma continuously successful is because this is what you're expecting. This is what you're going to get. Trauma files out there, or I think trauma maniacs. This is what they're looking for because
what they want, yeah,
right. And okay, so the appeal for me in that respect, and one of the reasons why I love trauma production so much, is not because is not for the stories they tell. It's not even for the what essentially told me is that I too can produce movies, and they don't have to be these incredible, blow your mind cinematic blockbusters in order to be a successful filmmaker. Lloyd Kaufman taught me very, very early on, as I was beginning to flex, kind of like spread my wings in this industry, that I too could make movies. That you can make a movie and it's okay. All you have to do is get the fucking thing in the can. And that's what was important. Don't start the movie and then all of a sudden you run into a difficulty and everything just falls apart. I can't tell you how many times I have watched that happen, where all of a sudden things get tough, or you run into your first roadblock, as it will happen on every production you run into.
I was say there's no such thing as a smooth production. It just does not exist.
And that's the whole thing. I mean, if every single film ran into a problem and then all of a sudden, they're just like, well, we don't know what to do. We throw up our hands and then we end production. There would be no movies made, none whatsoever. Right. Even if you go back and look at the history, even major blockbusters, James Cameron has run into the stories he tells about the problems he's run into on his earlier pictures. Nowadays, you still run into issues as far as like, where is this? Why aren't you doing your job? All your basic kind of crap. But back in the day, before he established himself as a name, when he came out of the special effects industry with Piranha 2, and then he went into directing, and then, he knocked out of the park with Terminator, and then of course Aliens. The problems he had on Aliens, I wouldn't even know how to surmount, because the biggest one he ran into on that one was he had a crew that didn't want to work for him because of the mentality. Because he was an American who came over here, and his English crew, because it was shot in the UK, right. His English crew didn't respect him and didn't think he was experienced enough. he didn't hire enough English people to work on the film, and he didn't have English actors in the movie. It was like, what the hell? You bring your production over here and you barely use any of us. You're just using this for the location. Fuck you. And his crew would like walk out on him, like in between takes. They get a take done, and then all of a sudden they get fed up. Oh, it's time for tea, and then they all leave. Now I'm sitting here and I'm the director, and I'm like, I've got actors ready to go. I've got a set ready to go. I've got pyrotechnics and all kinds of shit, and blah, 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 like this. And the crew is gone.
Yeah.
And how he won them over is is an example of how you solve those problems. How he won them over is at the end of one night, he assembled everybody into a theater that he rented out. He said, I'm going to rent out this theater, and I'm going to show everybody Terminator. And he invited the entire cast and crew, everybody, to fill up this theater, and he showed them Terminator. The next day, everybody is on point. Because they realized, holy shit, this guy actually does fucking know what he's doing. Let's fucking make a movie.
Yeah.
So Lloyd Kaufman taught me. And in his book, he had a book called Make Your Own Damn Movie. And his book had so many tidbits like that of overcoming adversity in order to get your film in the can. And that mentality is what has saved this franchise and kept it going, because you see that willingness to get a product done and to get the product out there and to keep it going. And this is when, and don't worry about the fact that it's cheap. Don't worry about the fact that it, whatever. If you can do it better, it's almost like an invitation.
Yeah.
If you can do it better, go fucking do it better.
Yeah. Tell your story. And that's what, okay, so talking about trauma films, even as cheesy as some of the stories are, like the Nukem High and the what became of the story of the Toxic Avenger later on, they all had at least cohesive stories to tell. They were told in a fun way. I feel like that didn't happen on Witchcraft very much. But yeah, if you can tell a good story, capture it as best you can with what tools you have, and then make your film, make your movie, put it out there, see what happens. Maybe somebody will look at it and say, you know what, where I don't like the shot selection, but I like how you told the story. There's something to be worked with it. And then somebody will pick up and run with that. And then, you know what I mean? You just get, the more experience you have, the better. The more films you can put out and learn from your previous experiences, the better you are going to be at storytelling, which is ultimately what film industry is.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, success is just failing until you stop, and you gotta weigh it. Do I do a crap movie or do I do no movie? The no movie's guaranteed failure. And if you look through these, like, you'll see little names pop up here and there that went on to do other stuff. The one did the music, did for the very first one, went on to do some semi-big films like Operation Dumbo Drop, and a couple others, and none of them are insane. But then you've got the director from the last three. He's a key grip on a bunch of big movies. He was on The Eternals, and being on set and doing something's better than working in a grocery store. So you just take the opportunities where you can get them, and don't listen to people who have never done it.
Everybody's got to get their start somewhere. We had Jim Ojala on the show a few weeks ago, and essentially that's what he was doing. He was doing special effects and working behind the scenes and building his name up that way, and then eventually dropped his very first film, which was the eco horror we talked about. Why is the name suddenly escaping me? I'm so annoyed.
I remember we talked about it.
We talked at length about it.
Yeah. I thought it was Ojala.
Jim Ojala. My bad. I don't know why I've had trouble with his name. Strange Nature. Strange Nature was his first film, but that took time. And he worked. I mean, he started out, and he started out in trauma.
Yeah, well, yeah, which is cool. I think that's a cool backstory. A lot of people you go look up James Cameron's first film. It's not fucking Titanic. It's not even, you know what I mean? It's not even the Terminator. That may be the first big one that we remember him for, the first one that would put him on the map, but he made other films.
Piranha 2.
There you go.
You know, it was that man who came out and said, let's make the piranhas fly.
Well, just look at Peter Jackson. I mean, the
yes,
movies
Bad Taste and Dead Alive and Meet the Feebles.
They're
right?
brilliant, but they're not in the vein of what you think of somebody that's going to be making Lord of the Rings and King Kong and everything.
Right.
You make what you can, and I think a lot of people worry too. Like, if you make this decision, you're going to paint yourself into a corner. If you make the bad movie, you're going to be the bad movie director, and that's not necessarily so. And even if you are, hell, it's better than bagging groceries. I mean,
Ultimately, I think that the appeal of films like this, anything that falls within the realm, you could say that Witchcraft falls into its own kind of like special category. The appeal of films like this is, I think, appeals to filmmakers who would be like, I could probably do that better. Or I could do the exact same thing. Or, hey, I didn't realize I could make a movie, and it would be okay if it was not, as great, not as great as everybody else. And you can do that. You can go out there and be a filmmaker, and people will watch your movie. So that's one thing you can do, but I think it also appeals to kind of like the Jerry Springer side, the thing that the sides of us that love watching a dumpster fire and love watching something of that nature, whatever it kind of fires up within you to kind of go, oh God, it's so bad, or oh, that's laughably bad, or it's so bad it's good. And whichever one, I think that's where the key of it is. And they really, really went hard. Oh, is this Rodent Noah Sam says even Robert Rodriguez made bad short films before making it big, and he did.
Yep,
he absolutely did. Now, this particular one, this franchise in itself pretty much ran the same schlock shit through like 1 through 13. The same schlock story. Heroes go after bad guys and counter shit, lots of tits and ass. And then you get into the final trilogy. So the final trilogy itself, that was, okay, we talked before about how film companies can save money by amortizing their budgets.
Yep.
And that's essentially what they did with the last three. With the last 3 movies that were produced by David Sterling Productions, is they took $25,000 and they used $25,000 to shoot 3 movies back to back to back.
Think about that. Extrapolate that. $25,000 to shoot 3 full-length feature films.
I can tell you they didn't spend that budget on the acting talent. Because
taking $25,000 to go and film 3 full-length feature films is the equivalent of taking $1,000 to go buy 3 running automobiles.
But that's the thing. I would pay to see the behind the scenes of that getting made. I would pay more than I would pay for the movies because, like I said, you're talking about a guy that's a key grip that has a dirt cheap budget and 3 movies to make it once. What sort of hell did that guy crawl through to get those movies out? That I would like to know.
That would be wild. Because you set up you got your sets, and that was good because it's one trilogy, so they pretty much keep it in one location. They reuse the same locations over and over and over and over again. They're just telling different stories, throughout each different deal. So you can see where they reuse as much as they possibly could in order to get that budget stretch that thing as far as they possibly could. And then of course they finally, and of course you see that in 14 and 15, and then finally in the third film. And this was, I think, for the three total of them was like 2. I think if you combine them all, it's like 243 minutes of footage is what they shot. There are motherfucking blockbuster directors that will shoot 243 minutes of footage just to make one movie. And these are combined runtime. So if you talk about stuff behind the scenes, I'd like to see what made it on the cutting room floor in these particular movies, because
I don't think anything made it to the cutting room floor. I don't think they had time.
Well, what blew my mind is they're made at the same time. Then how did the acting get worse between 14 and 15?
They ran out of coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably went insane being restricted to the same set for so long because you need a little bit of variety, but.
Catering budget dropped consistently. It's like you start out and you get a decent little spread, but then once the catering budget runs out, they're eating pretty much Wonder Bread and water.
Nothing but you just go empty the gas station into 3 coolers and bring it back.
I've been on a couple productions that were like that. It's like well, run into the what was it? It was those cheaply made sandwiches you could get. Like you could just get a whole bunch of them from either a gas station or from like a Walmart. And it was just like these $3 to $2 sandwiches. Be like, okay, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? There's 3 options.
That's like half of my family events right there.
Hey, Omni Oros Boros is in the house. Good to see you, Omni. Thank you so much for being here. Rodent Knows Him says, at Troma, Craft Services was Kraft Mac and Cheese.
No, it wasn't Kraft Mac and Cheese. It was Sam. No, not even Sam's Club. I think Sam's Club was too much for them.
It was too pricey.
Yeah. It was just mac and cheese substance.
Simulated cheese product.
Cheese product.
Velveeta's government cheese, man.
You know,
just paying for it now.
Yep, they just put it in a cardboard box. Didn't even bother putting a label on it. Written in Sharpie. Macaroni noodles and cheese-like substance.
You've got to feed your actors. You've wrote it unless they just Safeway Select. They couldn't afford Great Value. Great Value is way too pricey for us.
What kind of movie you think we're making here?
I'm the producer. You think I'm fucking made of money?
Yeah.
So at this big one, yes, Jinju, Dollar Tree knockoffs, the Dollar Tree brand. Charlie Welch's cheese flavored tang and pasta product.
Oh, yeah,
that's exactly right. Yep.
Oh man, these noodles taste a little citrusy.
Anytime you make a mistake pouring the powder in and it starts to cake up on the noodles, it's just you're in for a bad meal. It's so terrible.
Just make sure the noodles are cooked, because I had stuff like this on a production one time, and everybody, because the noodles were undercooked, and so but everybody was starving, so everybody chowed down, and by the end of it, everyone's like, oh God. It's like it expanded in everybody's stomachs, and it's like, he's trying to say lines when you're literally about to empty out. Yeah, it's nuts.
Painfully bloated with gas.
With banana chips, and I don't touch anything banana anymore. I damn near died.
Banana chips.
So the big thing on this one, and it may have come a little bit late, and whenever anybody goes and checks out the 16th movie, if you can make it to the 16th movie, is that's when the franchise really went meta. Is because a running gag, they don't try to make it into a running gag, but one of the things about the Witchcraft franchise is that the actors continuously change. It's not the same dude playing the main character William all the time. They're consistently reusing sets and shit. So at that point in the 16th film, they really tried to go in Hollywood Coven. They really tried to go meta with it and poke fun at these things to be like, this is all part of the whole storyline, is that the reason these characters keep changing, the reason we keep changing actors, the reason it looks like the way it does, and we keep running the same story over and over again, is because that's all the part of Satan's plan. So because the 16th one is set in real life, and so they try to do an almost new Nightmare kind of thing with it, and I thought that was weird and a little.
If you're gonna rip off movies, might as well rip off the good ones.
Yeah, and like I said, they tried to go meta with it, and I think a little bit late, because they're a little bit late to that game in trying to do that, which is why the last 3 really haven't done anything. I'm impressed they got 3 movies in the can, 3, and I use the term watchable very loosely. 3 in the can for the budget that they did. Cool. I mean, that's awesome. I'll applaud the ability to do that, but I think that they're running behind the times. This speaks to, despite everything they've tried to keep the franchise alive, keep the horror elements, genre bend it as much as they can, make them as cheap as possible for the easiest form of distribution. I think now here we are in the 2022, mentalities have changed. The Me Too movement, sexual exploitation, just not having it. The atmosphere, I don't think today. Now we may come back around to it, where we get around to where where the vast majority, we'll dig movies like this. But the topics of today are kind of hurting what this film is trying to do. And not as many people have a stomach for it, or are not going to admit that they watched it and they liked it for fear of what it might say of them. So we may be in that point in time where
trying to say that political correctness killed this franchise.
I'm thinking it didn't kill it outright, but it wasn't hanging on by much. And that what it was hanging on, it was kind of dealt that one last blow, and now it's kind of like, oh, that's the redheaded stepchild that nobody really wants to address anymore, and we'll just kind of like leave it over there. So where it dies kind of a silent death, which is a shame. I'll say even for these movies, 38 years of films, interconnected storylines, expanded universe with alternate characters and going in different places, even a little bit of meta touching, some comedy here, a whole lot of tits and ass there. It serves its purpose. But man, it just cannot stand the test of time. And to see a damn near 4-decade franchise die off like that, a quiet, pitiful death, just is sad. And I think but you run into it, you know? The age of Hammer horror eventually had to die. And I don't know if you guys saw the Netflix the Netflix Dracula series.
I haven't seen this one.
Yeah.
So there was a 3-episode arc, because when you have in England when they'll shoot stuff like this, they'll shoot like one episode, and one episode will essentially be a movie. And there were 3 parts to it, essentially as 3 films that straight up was a revival of Hammer horror. Classic Hammer stuff throughout the deal. And I was shocked by how many people did not flock to it. But then again, the generation that really, really loved that stuff is going away. Sadly, we're a dying breed. And
we pass this stuff on to our friends and younger relatives. My kids they're starting to get into this stuff. Like with things like Pet Sematary and whatnot. I mean, they're getting slowly but surely they'll get into it. A lot of the younger generation will look back to, because honestly, we weren't born in the 70s. We look back to the 70s at these films, and with revere and not nostalgia, but we look at them and respect them for what they are and where they were trying to do. If we did, we wouldn't have this podcast. But I don't think that our generation is getting older for certain, but I think there are other generations that are coming up that enjoy the genre, that still want to immerse themselves in the genre and the history of the genre, because the horror genre has a very rich history.
Well, and the thing too that people forget about, when they try to take Ghostbusters is a great demonstration of it. When they try to continue, remake, do anything, they do not take into account everything that's going on behind it at the same time, and that's really what attaches something to you. It marks it indelibly on you. And when you're doing it with your kids or just younger people in general, it tends to be that experience with you that marks it for them. And there's no way to force that. So it's almost a crapshoot. You've got to get the basics in there. You've got to get a good movie out most of the time. But you can't recreate it. So, and then too, you were talking about, is it dying? You see it with, whether you are continuing, like with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or you try to reboot, like with Friday the 13th and stuff, there's got to be a certain amount of time for it to kind of settle in the imaginations of people, because if you keep doing it too quick, people get sick of it. How many horror series have we seen that they try to reboot? Well, series in general, they try to reboot, they fail. They try it again, they fail. And by the time it's done, nobody wants to see this, and you've got to wait who knows how many number of years. So we could see it come back around, but given that there are more in this series than there are in pretty much any other, like, it's a long time for that to settle and be ready for continuation. Plus, rejuvenating this sack of trash is going to take some serious talent.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. So that really is the question. After 38 years, is the franchise over? And I wanted to ask you guys that, just your honest opinions on that. Were the last 3 films, were they the end? Because it's still open. You could still continue this on. If some other filmmaker wanted to pick up the rights, or pick up or license the Witchcraft franchise, pick up the rights that produce underneath it, could we continue? I mean, it could continue.
Sure.
But is this the end? Because, franchises do end. And, yeah, well, like I said, even though people will try to force it, I don't think we're going to get another Leprechaun film. Warwick Davis is too old to play it. He doesn't want to play it anymore. He did his bid. They tried to rejuvenate it with 2 films beyond that, and both of them were absolute trash.
Because they try to take themselves too serious. Nobody watches a Leprechaun film for a super serious movie. Nobody.
Right. So I could say that the Leprechaun franchise is probably dead. Critters has moved on to Shudder. So Shudder is pretty much hosting that, but that's where it found some life.
Yeah.
But who else is going to go to Shudder? We're not going to get another Critters movie, most likely, unless whatever. So I think
you might. You might get another Critters movie.
Critters versus Gremlins.
Yeah, I think that's what should happen.
That would be so awesome. Leprechaun Leprechaun the animated series.
Oh God,
that would be funny. That would be hilarious.
Leprechaun versus Witchcraft.
I mean, yeah, but if you think about it, Critters had a movie out 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
He has 2019. 2019 was the last actual film, and now I believe it's a series on Shudder now. Which may I don't even know if it's gotten a second season or yet, because I guess just kind of making it to see if there's any real interest for it out there. But franchises do die. They do. Maybe there'll be a nostalgia thing, someone will bring it back. But honestly, I hate to see a dang near 4-decade franchise die off like this, especially so quietly. But the reality of it is, I don't think that there's a place for it anymore. Sexploitation is going down the drain if it's not down the drain already. Sexploitation is just, that kind of mentality is just.
Well, the pendulum might be swinging away from it, but it'll come back.
You think it'll come back?
Yeah.
It'll have to be more episodic, I think, where you're not continuing to focus on one character, but instead each movie it's connected, but it's a story unto its own. That it's either that or you're not going to have nobody's going to grant a big budget on title. So you're going to have to get lucky enough to have somebody that's a good writer and is passionate about it, or a good director that's passionate about it, that's willing to work for that little pay. Because
John Rhys Davies.
The only way to continue.
So you're saying I need John Rhys Davies for this? I've seen some of the movies he's been putting out lately. Ooh.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hey, Elizabeth S. Good to see Elizabeth Sylvester. Good to you. Thank you so much for being here. So yeah,
this franchise, I don't think this particular franchise is dead. I think they'll figure out a way to squeeze out another couple of films out of it. I mean, as of now, it just becomes one of the longest running jokes in the genre. So we got to keep it going. Especially if they can crank out 3 for $25,000. I mean, I'm sure they could find another $25,000 loose somewhere. Crank out 3.
I would like to see them really pick a direction with it, because they don't go.
It's too late for that. It's too late for that.
Well, it's the subjects all of them have kind of remained at a kind of stasis where they go a little slasher, but not very much slasher. They have some of the sex, but obviously it's pretty soft. They talk about the supernatural witchcraft, but they don't dive into it. I mean, I would, because they take, and in this last series, they pray to Aradia, but they never say anything about Aradia, or Aradia as they pronounce it. If they dived more into that, I think it would spice up their plot. It would involve the viewer a lot more and stuff like that. I think if they could do that, they might be able to continue on. It might be worth continuing on, but until they take a risk and go a direction with it, I just think it's going to stay boring, because that's where it's at for me. It's boring.
Rhoda Noah's name says $25,000. You could crowdsource that shit. Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, really.
And the last one came out in 2016. Last one came out in 2016. So
it's been a minute.
It's been a minute. It's been a few years. So maybe,
Yeah.
What was this? Travis Brown says, fell asleep on the stream, and all I'm hearing, witchcraft and boobs. That's pretty much what it is.
That's all it is.
So, given all of this and this huge look at the Witchcraft franchise in and of itself, and what it has given us, what it has tried to do throughout history, throughout the last almost 40 years that the movies were being made, And it's kind of, is the end of the franchise uncertain like this? I have to ask, and this is the big CTA for this episode. I have to ask everybody, you guys and everyone in the live chat as well, who has watched any of these movies, what is your favorite entry in the franchise?
I don't know if it was the first one because it was the best movie or the last one because I didn't have to watch any more of them. I mean, that's just where I stand.
That's fair.
I tried, man. I tried. I'm like, this is my genre. We're going to do this. And then sleep overtook me.
For me, it was the first one because, I mean, it was not good. It wasn't great, but it was fucking leaps and bounds better than anything else that came out. But the first one, because it seemed like it was a genuine attempt at making a film, making a creepy film.
Yeah. I would agree, and I'm going to agree with Johnny this. My favorite of them was actually the first one as well, and that is because I have a personal pet peeve. I don't mind bad movies. Like I said, like I say in our trailer, I'm a masochist, and I will watch that shit. But I have a real pet peeve when it comes to lazy filmmaking, and lazy filmmaking really pisses me off because if you have the opportunity. Filmmaking, no matter what you're making, I'm going to stress this, no matter what kind of movie you're fucking making, filmmaking is fun. It is supposed to be fun. No matter whether it's a comedy or a drama or romance or Pride and Prejudice with fucking zombies. Filmmaking is supposed to be fun. And if you make it not fun, then you have failed in your job. You have failed this city is what you have done. And that when I see lazy filmmaking, maybe it's because I know too much about behind the scenes, but you can see when people they're not even making choices at all. It's not just that they're not taking risks; it's that they're not capitalizing on opportunities. We could do this. Nah, we don't need to do this. Fuck that. If you have an idea, if you have an opportunity, fucking throw it out there.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's about. This is the whole point, is to have fun. And lazy filmmaking is not fun. It's not fun for the director. It's not fun for anybody. It's not fun for the crew. It's not fun. It's sure as shit is not fun for your talent. Okay? When you're not willing to do anything other than cookie cutter bullshit and not even willing to take a risk with your camera angles. Take a shot. Do something different. But no. Lazy filmmaking pisses me off. So while I could stomach getting through these things, the lazy filmmaking is what really puts me off. At least that's one brilliant thing that Troma never does. Troma's filmmaking is never lazy. And that's why I think that Troma wasn't so much behind the scenes of this rather than just producing them, is because I can't see people that Lloyd Kaufman work with making lazy choices.
Yeah, you can't see
never seen it
hands on this at all.
Right. I just don't see that. I don't see Troma unless it was just like, say, throwing money at something to maybe have this in their library and say, hey, we produce a slightly more serious film style, but they put it in the hands of somebody else. Because Lloyd Kaufman is not about lazy filmmaking. Lloyd Kaufman is about energizing, super fun, goofy as shit. Everybody, it's a laugh riot to shoot this thing and to watch it. That's the whole point. Have fun making a movie. No matter what kind of movie you're making, have fun. If you spoil that for everybody, not only if you're spoiling it on set, your audiences are going to pick that up, especially if your audiences know anything about the process. And that's what aggravated me. The first film at least had some semblance of, we're going to try and tell a story. We're going to have these creepy moments. We're going to do the best we can. We're going to stretch our budget as best we can. And we're going to try and do something cool. Even though we completely stole our idea from somebody else, and we're not going to tell it and hit all the same beats, and it's going to fall flat on its face, and it's not going to do what we wanted to do, and it's not even so bad that we can laugh at it. It's just kind of like, what was the point? I get that. It happens, but at least they tried.
Yeah, and one's the producer with driving it to the can to get it done, too. That's just... if it's a director doing it, good. If it's a producer doing it, it's just basically just get something on film and get it out, and that's no good.
Jinju says, take a risk with your camera angle. So go down cleavage instead of upskirt. Got it?
Yeah. You're picking up what we're putting down.
Just do something interesting,
Eugene says none of them.
Do what?
Eugene says none of them.
Oh, I can imagine. Eugene would hate all of these.
Oh, yeah.
Eugene has standards. I don't have standards. I have no standards.
I have standards. I have standards. I'm just willing to bend those standards for the show.
I've got standards, but I mean, I'm going to die someday and look back on this and be like, what could I have done with those hours of my life besides watch Witchcraft?
Well, okay, one thing you can take away from this by watching these movies, and we've said this about a number of films we've talked about in the past. If you want to get into filmmaking, if you want to get a sense for what we do, like what we're doing, like me, Johnny, Eugene, all of us, the shit that we do behind the scenes. If you want to get a feel for it, watch movies like this. Don't think about it from the respect like I'm watching a movie about the same guy every time doing blah blah blah. Don't watch it from that respect. Watch it and look for the decisions, look for the choices being made.
Look for the technical aspect of it.
Look at it like you're watching the sausage being made. Where do they set up their camera? Where do they set up their light source? How are they capturing their sound? What choices did the actors make? Because actors' choices are not always their own. Sometimes the director is telling them what to do. So, look for opportunities. If you were a director, how would you tell them to approach a scene differently? Take notes, learn from these things. Every movie is an opportunity to pull something from it if you too want to make movies. If the first words out of your mind, out of your mouth, after watching Witchcraft 11 is, I could do that shit 10 times better, go out and fucking do it. Because these movies are essentially an invitation to go out and do it better.
Well,
and
really,
it wouldn't be hard.
Any movie could be an invitation to go and make it better, but these ones specifically, because they're so cheaply made and quickly produced and whatnot. But yeah, definitely.
Well, and there's it's survivorship bias. You probably heard of it. The planes during World War II, they had bombers coming back, and they were trying to decide where to reinforce them, make them stronger, and they kept looking at the ones coming back, and they're like, okay, they've got bullet holes here, we'll reinforce them. They were not doing well. Well, then they realized that, hey, planes are not getting back. And they patched the areas where they didn't see bullets, because the bullets were, they took those bullets in those areas, they went down. Nobody saw them again. So watching a bad film can teach you some strong lessons about what not to do as well. Right. I mean, okay, I wouldn't have done that. Well, then don't do that. Remember it.
We've seen a lot of first efforts. We've looked at a lot of first efforts, because we'll look at movies that other podcasts or other horror shows will not look at. Yeah, they won't even bother to touch them. But because because Week in Horror is designed not only for horror fans to possibly hear about a movie they never heard about before. It's like, oh, I've never heard about this. We bring those titles up so people be like, oh, we find the gems that are hidden on Amazon, like the first time efforts that are surprisingly good that you wouldn't have expected. Or we'd be like, no, we watched this thing, but definitely go and watch it, because you can learn a lot as a filmmaker yourself about the different things that you could have done differently, things that should have been done differently. You'd be like, I would have done this. I would have had my actors do this. I would have shot it in this direction. I would have tried this camera technique that I saw work in this other horror film, and then I would have set this up differently from here. So, and you can keep these. Everyone's got their book of tricks. Every director has got their book of go-to things that they know work, things they've developed themselves, and things that they've seen other people use. And you can see that. You mentioned Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson's the exact same way. If you look at Bad Taste and Dead Alive, there are camera tricks that Peter Jackson uses in those movies that he uses in Lord of the Rings, that he uses in The Frighteners, that he used in Kong, that he uses in all of his shit. In all of his big stuff where he had a lot of money and there's a lot of things riding on this one. There's stuff that he utilized that he knows works. They're almost like signature Jackson moves. Every major director you've ever heard of. Spielberg does it. Everybody knows Spielberg loves scenes of people looking.
Yep.
Scenes of people looking is what Spielberg is all about. From Duel all the way to Saving Private Ryan and so on and so forth, is someone looking just past the camera at something and then their reaction. Scenes of people looking. So find your pieces. Find the little things that set you apart, the things that you really, really like, and then use those to your advantage. You'll learn these by watching movies like this.
I think you're saying that we're the human shield, in other words, that go out and field the fire.
We are
from this crap, so other people can decide whether they want to go out too.
We take the hits.
Human shield my ass.
Oh man, we've been talking about this for a minute. And
far too long. I mean,
I think wrote it in the last name. Bring that the Sam Raimi twist zoom, like that. Yep. Sam Raimi has his classic stuff that makes it into every one of his films. So yeah, everyone's got their techniques. Find yours, because whatever everything you watch, just like writers need to read. Writers need to be reading all the time. I don't have my library. My library is in the living room, but my library is extensive because I read as often as I can, as often as I have time for. I devour as many books as I can. Not to mention everything I read when I was younger growing up. I mean, writers read, filmmakers watch movies. That's the key.
Yep.
So I think it's that time that everybody's waiting for. What do you think, Aaron? Is it trivia time?
Oh,
yeah.
Look, JL, we got to work on this, okay?
What?
Because you set it up. You set it up really great. And it's just as I'm about to go in there and be like, oh, yeah, it's time for us to go home. You know what I mean? Bypassing the trivia, and everybody gets all mad. Like, no, it's trivia time. They riot. You just like bulldoze.
That was an opportunity for Aaron to jump up and go, yes, it's trivia time. I was passing.
I know. But I wanted to shut all over that. Like, no, it's not time for trivia. It's time to go home because this movie sucks.
So it's the time everybody except Johnny was waiting for, in other words.
All right. Well, I will say this before Aaron delivers the trivia question for tonight. We are giving away a Week in Horror pint. No, that's not what we're giving away. No, at all. But we are giving away a Week in Horror pint glass. So our super popular pint glass, which apparently everybody thinks was amazing. There it is.
Yep.
Aaron Reese has got one right there. It's got the artwork from our very first limited edition t-shirt on it that came out so amazing. I think it's brilliant. So, but yes, Week in Horror pint glass coming to the winner of this particular trivia question. Aaron, whenever you're ready.
All right. Sorry to say somebody switched to the live chat here. So
I've got it pulled up.
All right. Nice.
By the way, I know the answer, so if you want it, just PayPal me $10 and I'll give it to you.
Kidding. Ooh, Chris Durham says, oh, wait, no. Roden Ellis name says, my trivia guess, Johnny O's hairless arm. And Chris Durham says, my guess for the trivia question is Herbert Lom in the first cross-dressing role as Barbara Streisand's evil twin in Moonstruck 3, The Unsharening. Yay, pint glass. It's so specific.
I like how he ended that one.
So
he's been working on that all episode.
Yep.
All right. So because Aaron cannot win, we're gonna let Aaron call it the trivia question tonight.
And cornered me on it. All right. The first Witchcraft was seen as a ripoff of what legendary horror film? The first Witchcraft was seen as a ripoff of what legendary horror film?
First correct answer in the live chat gets a Week in Horror pint glass. Week in Horror pint glass up for grabs. Angel Rivera.
Well, if you were paying attention, we gave you the answer early on in the.
I actually did.
Yep. It's kind of hard not to.
Tone regime, sarcasm, they were all. You guys were just they were right on top of each other.
Everybody's right on there. The very first person to get in, I've got it with the live chat, is after sarcasm said go diggity, was Angel Rivera with Rosemary's Baby. Congratulations, Angel Rivera. There's Tony Regime, Rosemary's Baby, sarcasm, wrote it no last name. Unfortunately, Mac and Me was not the answer, but it was the answer of last week's trivia question.
Mac and Me was an abomination of another type.
Angel says, see, I have been awake all show. That's excellent to know. Thank you so much, Angel. We do appreciate it. Charlie Welp says, Short Circuit 3. Legendary horror film. That's it. Well, congratulations to Angel Rivera. Way to go. You got yourself a Week in Horror pint glass coming to you. I've got that written down. I will get that shipped out to you. If I don't, has Angel won before? I think I've got Angel shipping details.
Just in case, go ahead and send it to us.
Yeah, shoot your shipping details to us just in case. I don't have them. I probably have them buried somewhere. But shoot us your deals via Discord or at weekinhorror@gmail.com.
Yep.
So and I will get your Week in Horror pint glass shipped directly to you. Congratulations.
Yay!
Yay! We made it through.
You did. We're not dead.
Oh, not completely. I think it might have killed my soul a little bit.
You're not going to get that piece back. Ever
get that piece of my soul back. Damn it.
They own it now.
All right. And that will bring another episode of the Week in Horror podcast to a close. Thank you all so much for listening, and we truly hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next week when we look back at the creepy Inuit horror nomads, poor home construction choices in The Evil, the taut and sublime werewolf horror late phases, and the dystopian sci-fi horror Parasite. Those are some good movies for once. Sort of. We'd like to send a special shout out to all of our amazing patrons who continue to help us make Week in Horror the incredible success it has become. Thank you all so much. Be sure to stop by Josh Olsen's store, www.badsamurai.store. He does all of our amazing artwork for the show, and his designs are incredible. Go check him out. He's got a lot of cool stuff on there. So he's always posting new things too. For more horror fun, be sure to follow us on all the socials where you'll get the daily splatter right into your feeds, and at Digital Darkness, our new gaming channel hosted by Alien X Gaming. He did Phantasm this past Sunday. It was a lot of fun. Please comment, like, subscribe, and smash that bell as if you're someone's number one fan for all the latest updates from the show. It still gives me the willies thinking about that scene.
It is just
those interactions really help us to appease the insatiable hunger of our dark god algorithm. Dun dun dun. And lastly, if you love what we do here and you would like and are able to support our production, you can do so through our Patreon. We have tiers as low as $1 a month. That's cheaper than a Walmart bin UA bowl film. Those are free. Higher tiers get
they pay you to take those, I think.
They'll pay you to take them.
Please take these movies.
Trash says they can't handle anymore.
Higher tiers get early and special After Dark access, bonus content, monthly horror movies, and can even join us as special judges for our bloodbath debates. Those are a lot of fun.
Those are fun, yeah.
But if Patreon is not your modus operandi, you can always support us directly through our PayPal. Links to everything, including our Discord community, where you can find film recommendations, trivias, trailers, horror watch parties, and even interact directly with us, are in the description down below. As always, sharing the show with the fans in your local horror community is the absolute best way to help us further our goals of global horror domination. Thank you all for being the greatest audience a podcast could have. I'm Johnny O.
I'm JL.
And I'm Aaron.
We'll see you next week. And as always, stay scared.
Bye.